Hey guys, welcome back to Skincare Anarchy. This is Ekta, and I have an awesome topic I want to discuss today. This is something that's been very, very much on my mind, and I think that my recent interviews with some of the brand founders and the guests that I've had on has really kind of sparked my interest in this even more. So, I want to get started. Basically, the topic here for the day is clinical trials. Now, I know that the skincare community, especially when it comes to over-the-counter skincare products like, for example, retinol, that's something that a lot of people ask me about. We got a lot of DMs from listeners about over-the-counter retinol treatments and, anything that's really, I guess, in the skincare space. A lot of people have questions about clinical trials, and that's a very valid question. That's a very valid concern. We definitely want to make sure that whatever we're using on our skin, since it is an organ, it is something that is a very complex organ, we want to make sure that everything that's working is, really tested and really tried. But here's my thing. I think that the biggest problem that we have as an industry, and I'm talking about the skincare industry, is that we put a lot of weight on the shoulders of brand founders when it comes to science. I think that we all have to really understand that there's a role that each member of the community that is making up this world of dermatology and skin health, both on in the cosmetic space as well as the science space. We all have different roles to play. For example, PhDs are involved in, very much cutting edge research that is ongoing around ingredients or different, ongoing therapies that are now being, that are emerging, especially from old Eastern medicine or, things that have been long forgotten. They're coming up onto the surface, and a lot of those things are now being applied in lab models. So I know that PhDs are working very hard to give us this data that, it's kind of like a jumping off place. But when it comes to clinical trials, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in terms of the general consumer about what goes into it. And this is something that needs to be talked about because it's very, very, very complicated. I mean, I can tell you firsthand as somebody who has gone through the whole process of starting a clinical trial, conducting it, and then publishing the research. It is very complex. You have to go through a series of events that are usually not only time consuming, but they're very expensive. There is this thing called an Irb approval. And basically what that is that you submit your proposal to a team of researchers that will then go through that proposal and figure out if the trial that you're trying to conduct makes any sense, making sure that there's no holes in the overall plan that you've presented. And this is a very long and tedious process. Irb approvals can take a very long time to be cleared. And then on top of that, to be able to get the things that we need to run these experiments. For example, if you want to do some sort of mouse model study, you have to buy mice that are maybe some knockout mice, which are knocked out for certain genes, or mice that are more susceptible to, for example, toxins, which is something I work with, like C57 mice. You might have to work with certain cell lines, which are also things that are, you need to buy through companies that sell to biomedical research labs. And these are extremely costly things. There's a reason why NIH grants funding in the millions to labs, because most of that funding goes towards the equipment and the materials that those labs need to be able to, create their cell cultures and maintain the cell cultures and run things like PCR or Western blots or all these different techniques that really tell us about, the genetic level of what's going on, or maybe, some other level, whatever we're looking at, whether it's, fluorescence or microscopy or any of this. These are very, very complex tools to use and to utilize. And not everyone, especially, brand founders, have access to this equipment. That is one of the biggest problems, and no one addresses it. It's something that no one really wants to talk about, and it's very easy to take, all the blame and put it on the shoulders of a brand founder. I mean, I'm all about the idea that we need to hold people accountable and make sure that whatever they're selling to the general consumer is something that is not going to harm them, and it's not going to cause any exacerbation of already pre-existing conditions. But that is also on the shoulders of consumers to be mindful and make sure that you're going to your yearly checkup with your dermatologist, make sure that you're following up on any kind of medical concerns that you have. So, my long story short, my whole point here is that, when it comes to clinical trials, there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of missing pieces in this puzzle that are not being talked about. And one of the biggest ones is the role that researchers play in conjunction with clinicians. This is a very, very important aspect. I think clinicians also have to be a little bit more forward and approach their research colleagues and say that, I've got samples for my patients. For example, if you have biopsy samples from patients who have, certain skin pathologies like rosacea or eczema or psoriasis, it's important for you to connect with PhDs and people who are working on academia levels so that those studies can be not only done but also expedited, because a lot of times the missing link between researchers and MDs is that there's no samples. There's no skin samples, from actual human beings. That's why a lot of the work is done in mice and a lot of the work is done in rats or animal models. And that's a huge problem. So, I'm just trying to explain here that, it's very easy to say things like on social media, like, okay, well, this brand doesn't have any clinical trials to back up what they're doing. There's no double-blind studies. There's no, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, at the end of the day, do you even know what goes into a double-blind study? Do you know the process behind creating a double-blind study and what resources you need? Most brands don't have millions of dollars at their disposal to just invest in all of the technology and the innovation that is needed to really carry out this work. And if you really want those double-blind studies, and if you really want those very, very extensive trials and studies and clinical, problem-solving techniques to be in place in the skincare industry, then we must all contribute. I've been a huge advocate, I mentioned this in my earlier podcast, of the idea that I think that skincare companies and also functioning dermatologists or anybody really in this space, both on the medical side and on the business side, we need to really come together and maybe create some sort of a foundation or a fund that is able to provide, monetary resources for these kind of studies and create a database that is based on ingredients rather than specific products, so that now you have, a place to go that everyone can utilize, both brand founders, dermatologists, as well as researchers, that shows you the data of that's, out there in terms of gene expression or, the effect that it has on, cell related markers, certain ingredients. So, it has to be a collaborative effort. That's the whole point here. I hope that, you guys take something away from this and really understand that the world of science is a lot more complex than it seems on the surface. There's a lot of, nitty-gritty politics that go behind funding and how that funding is received. For example, recently I had on a phenomenal, researcher. He works in stem cell biology, and we had this great conversation. And, you have to understand that the research he's done, and many researchers like him, there's millions of dollars that go behind just something as simple as figuring out what biological cytokines or molecules affect the expression of, stem cell changes that cause differentiation of stem cells, or any other, phenomena that you can think of. That's just an example. It's very, very important for us to understand that research is, it's a system. There's a system in place. The NIH has a very precise way that they screen projects and, proposals that come their way. I mean, 90% of the grants that PhDs submit are rejected, because of one small thing. The NIH reviewers might think that, hey, you don't have enough preliminary data, or, hey, your hypothesis isn't, completely, foolproof, or whatever, so there's a lot that goes behind this. It's a very, very lengthy process. So to say things like, well, this brand, I can't support them because they just don't have any clinical trials, I mean, that's just ludicrous. That means that you have no idea how science works on an academia level. And, for you to say that and to just demonize brands, I think that's unfair. because one thing I've learned through this journey and this making this podcast is the people I've spoken to and the companies that I've had the honor and the pleasure of interviewing and bringing onto the show. These are very hardworking people. They're doing their best. And a lot of the brands and a lot of the founders and the lines that they've created have come from a very genuine and, concerned place where they want to create something that is really genuinely helpful to people. I recently interviewed Shira Tabib from Lulav, and Shira had this amazing conversation with me about how, she basically took this heritage and this culture that her ancestors had been, practicing for many, many, many years and centuries, and took all of that knowledge and that information and really tried her best to apply it in this serum that she's created that is now over the counter, and it's a beautiful product. I can honestly tell you guys, I've used it myself, and that's just one example. I mean, this goes across the board. There are phenomenal chemists in this industry that do their best to just stick to the science and formulate in the best and cleanest way possible. So it's a very, very multi-layered conversation. It's definitely something that I think we need to open up, and I think we need more people at the table to talk about this. It definitely has to be, like I said, more collaborative, more open-minded when we discuss these things. We cannot finger point. There's absolutely no finger pointing that has ever led to any kind of constructive, progress. So, I urge everybody listening here, whether you're a consumer or a scientist or a doctor or an editor or anybody in the space, ask more questions and dive deeper, look deeper. Try to understand the systems that, are outside the realm of your expertise, and let's all come together and find better solutions. I think we can definitely do that. And I think skincare is such a unique space because it falls under the realm of beauty, but it is this beautiful, junction between beauty meeting science. And for me, that's just so amazing. And I think that's what draws me so heavily into skincare and skin health. So I hope you guys liked my little rant, but, I would love your feedback on this. I would love any comments, any questions, any input you have, any knowledge you have that you can share with me, because, by no means do I think that I know everything, because I definitely don't. There are a lot of areas I know nothing about, and I would love to invite you onto the show if you think you're somebody who knows a piece of this puzzle that the rest of us are missing. Let's take this conversation further and just learn from each other. So thank you again, and thank you so much for tuning into our episodes. It truly means the world to our team. We are so excited with all the support that you give us, and all the amazing people that reach out to us. Thank you so much, genuinely, from the bottom of our hearts. I never imagined that this community and the beauty community would be so amazing and so welcoming. So again, thank you, and I hope everyone is having a lovely week and has a wonderful weekend ahead. Thanks, guys, and stay tuned for some very, very exciting episodes that are coming up.